Hello, I am in a terrible reading slump. I think I was on the verge of it in my last reading vlog when I did all of the adaptations off of my TBR, but I'm fully in the midst of it now. The last book that I read was The Devil All the Time, and since then I have started several books, a lot of them being off of my TBR, but also several others that were books that I was excited to get into that I got from the library, or a hold came in on my Libby app. I've tried so many things and I can't seem to get into anything, and it sucks because obviously I do have reading goals that I would like to meet by the end of the year, and I feel like I'm falling a little bit behind on those, but mostly I just want to read a book. I want to fully get into something and be able to sit down and curl up with a book, and I just haven't been able to find anything that I could sink my teeth into. The only actual TBR book update that I have is that I did try to start Losing It by Emma Rathbone, and I didn't have the highest expectations for this one because it does have a pretty low rating on Goodreads, but I was still hoping that this would be something that would just be like an easy, fun, witty read, and I couldn't get into it. And so this is getting unhauled and got taken off of my TBR. But other than that, what else did I try to start? I tried to start Bride of the Tornado. I got that on the Libby app and had it on my Kindle and couldn't get into it. I just got the audiobook on Libby as well, and so I'm hoping that if I give that a listen, I can get into it easier, because I was really interested in the story. I just couldn't focus enough to read when I had it. So we're gonna give that a try. I started Magnolia Parks, which I'm not a huge romance reader, but I really love the idea of those books and have heard nothing but good things about them. But unfortunately, whatever I rented on my Libby app, I could only read it like on the app on my phone. It wouldn't let me send it to my Kindle for some reason, and there's no way that I'm finishing any book, but especially a book that's like this thick, on my phone. I'm just not gonna be able to stay focused enough to do that, so I'm hoping to still like rent the physical copy of that from the library at some point. What else? I think I tried to listen to a couple of books. Like, I've tried a lot of different formats to see if I could get out of this rut, and I just haven't been able to make anything stick. And I'm not fully blaming this on a book rut, because I do think that I've had a hard time recently like watching a lot of new movies or starting new television shows that I'm not already familiar with. So I'm not fully blaming it on books, because it is definitely popping up in a lot of different aspects of my life. But my biggest fear is that I'm in the midst of this rut and I'm gonna start books that I end up DNFing that maybe I would have liked at a different point in time when I was more motivated. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to DNF things just because I'm in this headspace when I would like them at a different time. So that's what I'm starting to get nervous about. So I figured that the easiest route may be to try to do the young adult books on my TBR, because theoretically they should read easier and they should have some easier themes. Not necessarily that they're gonna be fun, lighthearted books, because one of these in particular is not that at all, but at least like should be easier to digest or to get into. So I think that's what I'm gonna start with. So the 4 books that I have on my shelf that are YA are Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, which I've talked about before as something that I'm not typically into, or am not anymore. I might have loved this when I was younger, but I've just heard so many fantastic things about it. A lot of the booktubers that I follow really love Lynn Painter stuff, and I obviously love all of the movie references, and I'm hoping that that will help hook me. We have Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I was a big John Green fan when I was younger. I definitely grew up in the like golden era of John Green. I read The Fault in Our Stars and Paper Towns and Looking for Alaska as they came out, and then was the prime audience for those movies when they were made. And I haven't read anything by John Green since then. I still adore him and think very highly of him. But I've actually had this on my shelf since it came out. I got to go with my childhood best friend to the like book tour that John and Hank did together for this book, and we got like a hardback copy that he had signed. And I remember that night as being like one of the times I've like laughed the hardest in my life. I remember tears streaming down my face because I was laughing so hard because him and Hank were just so hilarious together. And Katie and I had a really, really fun time, but I actually never read this book, which is ridiculous because if you don't know, John Green lives in Indianapolis, and that's where The Fault in Our Stars is set. And I think he said in an interview that he wants to make all of his books from now on set in Indianapolis. And I am from Indiana. I grew up just outside of Indianapolis. It's just fun as a city that I feel like I don't usually get to see in books and movies, get to see it represented. The third book in my YA collection is The Spectacular Now by Tim Tharp. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I have a strong personal connection to this movie and to this story. I didn't know that it was a book initially when I first watched the movie, and so I've had this sitting on my shelf for a long time, but I never read it. And so that is number 3. And the fourth read is the tough read out of the 4, and that is The Book Thief. I have seen this movie, and this is one of my sister's favorite books of all time. And I just never got around to reading it. I think the topic scared me off, and also because it's a chunker, but I've always wanted to read it. I have never heard a bad thing about this book. I've just never gotten around to it. So those are the 4 YA books on my shelf that I'm hoping maybe will get me a little bit out of a reading slump, or at least back towards being able to appreciate and read something, anything is what I'm hoping for. So we're gonna start with these 2 and hopefully get out of this rut. Please, 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 please. Hello, a little TBR update. I finished Turtles All the Way Down and I'm giving it 4 stars. I loved it. I didn't realize until I was in the middle of reading it and almost done how much I miss John Green. I have always loved and respected him. He seems like a good dude, but I think also mostly I love that he writes books for teenagers that aren't full of cliches or making fun of the life of a teenager. He certainly, like, you know, deals with the day-to-day topics of like falling in love for the first time and getting into fights with your friends and arguing with your parents. But he also deals with these very real problems and gives weight to them and doesn't, I don't know, belittle you for being a teenager. And I loved that when I was a teenager, and I continue to appreciate that now. I found myself at the end of it literally crying. I burst into tears at the end of that book, mostly because, I don't know, I was hit with this wave of nostalgia and being thankful that I had a writer like that when I was younger. I think I was still being taught and heard by John Green now was just fun. It was such a well-written look into what someone with OCD struggles with, and I really enjoyed it and thought it was beautifully written as always. At the end of the book, I might have to just read you the end of this book, but at the very end of the book, I was listening to the Cape Elizabeth by Noah Kahan vinyl, which is one of my favorite EPs ever and features one of my favorite songs of all time, Maine, by Noah Kahan. And I was listening to Maine, and I was in the last 2 pages of the book, and I just burst into tears. Let's see if I can find. This is like minor spoilers, but not like, I won't hit like the main part of the spoiler. Actually, I'm gonna reevaluate this setup because that wasn't great. In the moonless darkness, we were just witnesses to the light, and I felt a sliver of what must have driven Davis to astronomy. There was a kind of relief in having your own smallness laid bare before you, and I realized something Davis must have already known. Spirals grow infinitely small the further you follow them inward, but they also grow infinitely large the farther you follow them out. And I knew I would remember that feeling underneath the split-up sky back before the machinery of fate ground us into one thing or another, back when we could still be everything. I thought, lying there, that I might love him for the rest of my life. We did love each other. Maybe we never said it, and maybe love was never something we were in, but it was something I felt. I loved him, and I thought, maybe I will never see him again, and I'll be stuck missing him, and isn't that so terrible? And I thought that was gorgeous. I don't know how much I would have been hit by that when I was younger. And so in a way, I find myself happy that I didn't pick this up when I got it when I was younger, and that I read it for the first time now, because I feel like maybe I was supposed to read it now. The magic of books and all that. But yes, I loved it. I went back and tabbed. I should have been doing it from the beginning, but I just wasn't sure if I was gonna like it, which was silly of me. I immediately watched the brand new movie afterward, which I had no idea when I said I was gonna start this, that the movie was literally coming out the day that I finished it. But I watched the movie afterward, and it wasn't, I would say, my favorite of his adaptations, but I thought that the acting was really great, and the directing as well. I like that they still had it set in Indianapolis, but I feel like it was extremely obvious that it wasn't actually in Indianapolis, and I kind of wanted to see more of her being there and it not just be like a sign on a wall that said Indianapolis that like pointed you in that direction. But anyways, this is gonna be one of my top books for the year. And then I'm also DNFing Better Than the Movies, which is wildly unfortunate. But I think that one, in stark contrast to this one, did feel a little too juvenile for me and for what I read now, which doesn't mean that it's not a good book. I'm sure that if I would have read that as a teenager, I would have loved it and it would have become my new personality. It's just not close enough to anything that I've read for the last so many years for me to be able to get into it. So I'm DNFing that. I'm about 50 pages into The Spectacular Now right now. And to be honest, I still haven't decided if I'm going to DNF it or not. I think the only reason that I haven't is because I can hear Sutter's narration in Miles Teller's voice in my head, and it's almost like listening to an audiobook, which sounds ridiculous, but it's just true. So that's made it easier for me to continue reading that one. But I would say it's still pretty close to what the movie is, but you get to hear a little bit more of his internal processing, which makes it like just different enough to keep going. So I'll update you later on that one, but so far it's going okay. Hello. Wow, my hair. I wanted to check in to say that I finished The Spectacular Now. I'm giving it 3.5 stars. I really liked it. I was definitely hooked after the first like quarter, basically after that first video that I made that I wasn't sure if I was gonna DNF it or not. But I feel like I have to share a little bit and be a little vulnerable in order for my review to fully make sense, and basically to say that because of the personal connection I have with this story and this movie and this book, I don't know that my review or my rating is going to be applicable to anyone else's experience reading this book. I have no idea how I'm going to go about this. I haven't plotted this out yet, but I figured I'd start with a review that I wrote for the movie on Letterboxd. I said, here's the tea. I've been in love with Sutter Keeley. I've been in this relationship. I know a lot of people who don't care for this movie. They think that Sutter is the worst, no good, that Amy's the victim of the story, that she was innocent and tainted by Sutter, that it's not realistic. And I hate to sound angsty, but if you don't like it, it's only because you haven't lived it. And it is angsty and dramatic, but it's very honest and true. If you don't know anything about the story, our main character is named Sutter Keeley. He's played by Miles Teller in the film, a very young Miles Teller. He narrates the whole book as well as the whole movie. We're inside his head the whole time. And he is the life of every party. He loves to live in the spectacular now. He doesn't like planning for the future or worrying about what's happened in the past. However, these living in the moment tendencies have led him down some paths, such as alcoholism at a very young age, which he refuses to admit or accept as something that's happening, as well as a few other things that really just give him this devil-may-care personality. He's had all of these girlfriends throughout school. He wants to be friends with everyone, but not in a people-pleasing way. It's just because that's his personality. He likes to talk to people and get to know people. And so he becomes friends with a girl in his grade called Amy Finicky. She's played by Shailene Woodley, and she's shy and awkward. She's a good girl who has always focused on her studies and her family, even when it wasn't necessarily fair. And it's come at the price of keeping her from making her own stories in life. So when Sutter comes along, he's confused by this girl that doesn't have stories of jumping off of roofs into pools, and she's flabbergasted that someone like him is interested in her and wants to hear about who she is and what she likes and what her family's like. Eventually, he basically accidentally falls in love with her, and they end up dating throughout the rest of their senior year. And this all comes with
ups and downs and positives and negatives of them dating and being together. Sutter really helps Amy begin to stand up for herself and do the things that she needs to do as a kid and someone that's growing up and making plans for the future. He adds color to her life. They make stories together, but some of his more crippling personality traits begin to rub off on her, and a lot of people see it as him tainting her. On the flip side, Amy helps Sutter begin to think about his future, think about his past and his dad that he doesn't know, and it's really like a case study of a codependent relationship at a very young and impressionable time in these two kids' lives. So all of that to say, and to go back to my review, I have been in love with a real life Sutter Keeley. There was definitely a time in my life when I very greatly related to Amy Finicky. And so reading a book from Sutter's perspective, I feel like I was both like more interested in it than some people would be, but also had a much harder time reading it than I feel like some other people would have. So the experience of reading it was a real mixed bag, but at the end of the day, I appreciate that Tim Tharp came up with these characters and wrote them down, because this is truly one of the most realistic and relatable books and movies that I have in my life to explain that particular time and that relationship. So we're sticking with 3.5 stars on this one. The movie, I think, will always be a 5-star for me. I think that the structure of a film works better for this particular story, and I also like the way that they cut down on certain scenes and characters and whatnot. So of the two, I think I would recommend watching it, but if you like YA and you're interested in the story, it only took me 2 or 3 days to read it. This means that we're at 31 out of 90 books read from the TBR, which also means that we're over a third of the way done. I know that I cheated a little bit and I did unhaul a ton of books, and that's why we got so far along, but it's still very exciting to feel like I'm like actually putting a dent in my goal, and I'm starting to look forward to continuing on my goal. So now I'm gonna start on, I don't know where it went, The Book Thief, and then it will already be the end of this vlog and this part of my goal. You will never really mind. Hello, it is 82 degrees and sunny and very toasty here. So I am going to a park to get a little sun. I stopped at Target and got a whole bunch of snacks and some food. And I purposefully didn't do makeup and wore waterproof mascara because we're gonna finish Book Thief this afternoon. And I do know what's coming because I have seen the movie, but I'm already tearing up just thinking about it. So wish me luck. Hello, I finished The Book Thief. I cried, of course, as you saw. I think I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars. I mean, it was absolutely stunning and beautiful. And as someone who, you know, has loved reading and writing my entire life, I love the theme woven through of how important words are and how much they can change everything. I would also like to believe that that is really what death is. I would like to have taken this book as nonfiction. I think it was absolutely fascinating, and it's one of those things that you both simultaneously are like, how did the author come up with that idea? But also it's so simple and so extraordinary at the same time. And I love that so much. So this means we're at 32 out of 90. I finished all of my YA books in my physical TBR, and we'll be moving on to something new next. I'm thinking maybe the hardbacks, but we'll see. But now I'm going to head to Target to get more bug spray and other such medications, because I just got bit about 15 times, but I couldn't get up because I was in the last chapter of the book. So I just kept scratching my legs. So I'm gonna go do that. Bye!